Hello everybody, this is Fun Police, and today I'm bringing you another Steel Division 2 deck guide, this time on the first Pancelos, a Hungarian armored division from Men of Steel. An interesting division. This is sitting somewhere in between some of the other Hungarian divisions. I would say it draws a lot of comparisons to first Lovas and second Pancelos that are already currently in the game. Compared to Verst Lovas, I would say it has better medium armor options, making it a bit heavier and a bit better suited to go into a longer game, while the second Pancelos outclasses it in armor. This has better infantry, so it sits as an interesting middle ground. I'm going to be playing this on the Maverick playstyle, although you could very well do this on a balanced playstyle if you leaned a bit more into certain tabs, and we'll talk about that when we get there. Regardless, let's go ahead and jump right into it with the first tab of Recon. We're starting off with a card of Toldi 2A in Phase A. Just a decent little armored Recon tank. 40mm gun, it can kill half-tracks and other things and harass infantry. Solid little tank overall, no complaints. And then I'm also running the unique SS Right off-color. An interesting 25-point Recon squad. Overall, I would say that you could very well make an argument for something like the Lovas Felder, which have an LMG. The big weakness of this squad is no LMG, but you could also even run these two-man teams just for the recon. But it's a bit unique. You get 8 of them. Trying them out, might be an interesting thing. And they do have an AT weapon, so, ups and downs. Then we move on to the much more interesting recon or infantry tab. The infantry tab has quite a lot of options to it, from cheap disheartened to some SS units. So I'm starting out in A with this Tartalek Lovez 15-point spam infantry. They have an AT grenade and an automatic rifle. The big thing is just that they're 15 points, easy to spam, good for filling out lines, and they can contribute a little bit and kill tanks. Not a lot to complain about. I also have the Tartalek Arkazak. This is a engineering unit, also disheartened. Honestly, just being cheap engineers is really strong, and disheartened actually works kind of well with the engineer and explosive plan. Throw the grenade and then retreat them, and they'll take less damage while still dealing a ton through their explosion. Not a lot to complain about, and they come in high availability. Then we have our main Phase A infantry, the motorized Lovez, with a Panzerfaust. These guys are actually pretty good. They have an MG42, meaning that they actually can fight, and then the Panzerfaust. Only 20 points also, honestly not a whole lot to complain about. They're not as good as, say, Panzer Grenadiers at range, but one MG42 will beat quite a lot of things. They're just overall very solid, and easy to support with thing like one of these reserve troops, and that can be a pretty powerful combination. We're taking them with one vet in order to maximize their efficiency. Then we're also taking a leader. I'm specifically taking this motorized leader because it has radio and smoke. Then in Phase B, another card of the motorized Lovez alongside the SS Reitjäger, which are our more elite infantry. Double MG42, a Panzerfaust, and some decent and some good SMGs. They're essentially just better Panzer Grenadiers. There's nothing to complain about. They're just very solid. They complement very well with our cheaper 20-point Hungarian units. We also have the SS Right Pioneers, which are an amazing CQC squad. They have the new Shock perk, which is, for those that don't know, within 180 meters, these guys get a suppression. They take less damage at close ranges, which is very effective, making them more durable within that 180 meters. The double flamethrower means that they are very strong, and they have 4 MP40s. These bolt actions are kind of the awkward part. If they had all MP40s, these would be like god tier, but even still, double flamethrower is really strong. So they're still quite potent, and they're very, very capable of winning CQC fights. Definitely a must-take. And then, finally, in Phase C, I have another card of SS Reitjägers in order to just kind of fill out that Phase C slot. We have the double MG42s, like I already talked about. Solid overall. In terms of the other options, we do have a second card of these Tartalek Lovez. If you wanted to spam cheap 15 points, you could maybe cut this motorized Lovez and then spam, that is a very legitimate option. It still complements well with the right Jaegers, although this might warrant some other changes and some other decisions, but that's a very real opportunity. These Carrick Parazak are overall kind of bad. I wouldn't take them. The only thing they have is they have 2 more infantry models than the motorized Lovez, but no AT and a much worse LMG. They don't really have a purpose. You have these essentially a Strum Pioneer stand-in. Not bad, just outclassed by the right Pioneer and these 15-point engineers. They just kind of don't have a place. Then we have the other leaders. Again, I mostly just took this leader because it's the only one that can come in A with smoke and a radio. And then you also have these motorized Pioneers. You could legitimately take these also. They do have an MG42 and they still have the explosives, but I like the 15.1 more. Easier to spam. You just have more numbers of them. It's just a bit easier to work with. And then the right Pioneers are still better than them. So, but they could legitimately maybe fit in over one of the motorized Lovez if you wanted to do that. Then we move on to the tank tab. The tank tab is very simple in how I've built it, but very effective. Starting off, we have these Toldi 2s, 10-point spam tanks. They're not going to be able to kill anything outside of like half-tracks and armored cars, but that's fine. They're 10 points, and you have 10 of them. They're good infantry support tanks. Spam the heck out of them, and they can support your infantry quite well. Then we have our main tank, which is the Turon 2. We do have several cards of Turon 1s, but I think the Turon 2 is just unequivocally better. Even though it's a little more expensive. Heat shells have a little bit more range than the Turon 1 gets, meaning that it's a bit better at fighting enemy tanks, and it has 90 millimeters of pen, so it can actually kill medium tanks sometimes. On top of that, it's got better HE on it, so there's just honestly not, in my opinion, a lot of reason to take the Turon 1, unless you're maxing this tab out. Instead, go with just the Turon 2s, 2 cards in A, 2 cards of them in A, and then 2 cards in B, just to maximize the spam. And then we also have this Stug leader, double vetted because we can do so. Just gives us some Stugs to play with, just the standard Stug 3. Not a whole lot to say. These are leaders also, so we get some bonus leaders from them. They're just solid. The only other thing I think worth noting is this Toldi 2 leader. 10-point leaders, potentially quite interesting. You do have also like leader versions of your other tanks, but you go with the 10 points if you take them. And then, like I said, I generally don't advise taking the Turon 1s. I just think the Turon 2s are better. Then we move to the support tab. Starting off, I have the Sendor in here. This is because I'm taking a lot of disheartened infantry in A. These guys are also decent combat themselves. They do have a light machine gun to support. They're fanatical, and they do have a decent amount of SMGs. They're not amazing by any means, but I like to play around with them and enjoy them. But you could very well cut them for, say, flamethrowers, which is always just a good option to take. There's kind of a personal preference there. We also have MG34s. Not a whole lot to say. It's just your basic MG34. Oop, this should actually be in the faster transport. My apologies. But essentially just not a whole lot to say. It's better than the other LMG, or the better machine gun, better suppression, better fire rate, better range, just better in every way. Then we have our leader. Not a whole lot to say. It's just an infantry leader. And then our supply trucks in Phase B, the bog standard that every division does. Like I said, for the flamers, you could place them over the military police if you didn't want to take military police. Although, I will note, if you take the military police and you want to take this Phase B card of various disheartened infantry, you definitely want the military leaders to bolster them, because that's a lot of disheartened infantry. But otherwise, you could replace them with flamethrowers. You have this 15-point 50 millimeter. 50 millimeter mortars are always solid. I just kind of ran out of room because it's very expensive to go into this tab. And the only other thing to note are these IG-18s, but they only come in B and C. I just overall didn't see really a purpose. You have a lot of cheap tanks you're spamming. You don't really need, like, the support guns, in my opinion. Moving on to anti-tank, we have this 44 millimeter, or this 44M bazooka team. It's essentially just a Panzerschreck with a little less pen, but you get 6 of them per card. Really, really good. You have this 75 millimeter AT gun. Even though it's got a high caliber, it is not that good at killing tanks. Its heat rounds are able to barely deal with medium tanks. However, it is 30 points, so it is useful in that regard as being a cheap AT option. You could also take these smaller 40 millimeters, but I like these because they're just good enough to kill mediums if you let them get in range. We also have our Stug 3Gs. Interestingly, this division has a lot of Stug 3s in its, or pretty much all of its medium tanks with the Stug 3s are in the AT tab. One particular note is that this means they have few HE shells on them, or fewer than normal, in favor of more AP shells, so that is a real issue. They're a little less good at supporting infantry, but otherwise they're just Stug 3s, good at supporting your, good at killing medium tanks, you know, all the things that you have for a Stug. I'm taking them in Phase A and Phase B. I also have them double vetted. You could down vet them if you wanted the numbers, but you only lose 1 or 2 in the case of the Phase B card, so kind of up to you, but we still have like 12 Vet 2 Stugs, and they really benefit from that veterancy. Then we also have the Pack 40, which is just very solid AT gun. Only takes it in B, but that's fine overall. Very, very solid. In our anti-air tab, this is an amazing tab because it's all Nimrods. That's all we need to take. We just have a ton of these Nimrods. You have the cheaper basic Nimrod, which is just good at essentially being anti-air. Although, keep in mind, it can actually kill some light vehicles and bully infantry if you use it as a ground support, as long as it gets within that range. And then you also have these 42M variants that have heat shells that, if they can get close and pull an ambush off, they can potentially kill even like IS-2s with these shells. So potentially really, really powerful with their heat rounds. On top of infantry support, they serve very dual purpose, but they're also just really good anti-air. Like 1 or 2 of these out, and you'll generally start shutting down any enemy aircraft. And they're armored and self-propelled. They're really, really good. Like, you should take nothing but these. Never take any of this other crap. You just want the Nimrods. I have the 42M variant with the heat in Phase A and Phase B, and then an extra card of Nimrods in Phase A. Although you could maybe move this to B if you wanted to and spam them. It's a legitimate option. Or you could even move, say, both 42Ms to B. That's a real option. Up to you. Play around with it. See what you like. Artillery. Artillery is overall a interesting little tab. I'm starting off with these 75mm howitzers. I'm specifically going with these howitzers because of the way artillery leaders changed. For those that don't know, artillery leaders now give significant buffs to tube-based artillery that is like howitzers. So these guys potentially get a big old buff. Not only do they get radio if they're in range of the artillery leader, but they also get just a passive dispersion reduction. 25% less dispersion is really, really strong. So that's why I'm taking these over mortars, although you could obviously go with mortars also. Then I have the Phase B artillery leaders, gives us some leaders in Phase B and ways to buff some of our artillery pieces. I have the Nevillewerfers, overall just decent rocket artillery. I'm bringing them in with supply trucks so they can keep barraging and be self-sufficient. You get 3 of them in B, overall very solid. And then 2 of these heavy 149mm artillery. Pairs very well with this leader. Just gives us some nice punch. Blows up enemy artillery with counter battery. Blows up AA or AT guns. Helps to soften enemy infantry. It pairs very well with the Nebelwerfers. This being more precision and counter battery, this being, you know, suppress infantry and, you know, scare off units that are defending. In terms of the other artillery, like I said, you could take mortars in A, or there's not really a lot else. This 105mm sucks still. I would not take this. The 120mm, low availability, and then this 149mm. If you're going balanced, you probably want the second card of these in like C in order to have enough artillery. This is like the big reason you could spam Neville Werfers and this big artillery and have a pretty effective artillery options for late game. Then we get onto the final tab, Air, which is one of the weirdest. So a big thing with this division is that pretty much all of its air options are locked to phase B or C, which reduces a lot of the effectiveness of them. So I've opted to be very minimal in this, just filling up essentially the cheap slots with a couple options. We have this Recon plane, this Focke-Wulf 189, fine little plane. It's relatively cheap compared to now a lot of the Recon planes, so that's nice. Not the best out there, but it's fine. It's got a radio on it. Can't really complain. And then in Phase B, I have these high caliber HS-129s. Thing can absolutely murder a lot of tanks and whatnot. The only problem is that it's very bad at turning and is very slow. But it does have high resilience, so it's a little bit better in that regard. But otherwise, there's honestly not a lot here. You do have this really, really good BF-109, but it's only in B. But it does have a 30mm cannon, and it moves at 670 kilometers, which is about as fast as any plane gets in the game. So very, very fast fighter with decent killing power. It's only coming in B, so kind of You do also have these Ju-88s. This is a good bomber, just only in Phase C, and as I'm Maverick, I'm not taking them, but you could take them if you're going for like a balanced version of the deck. You do also have this cluster bomber. This is actually a really good cluster bomber. Very solid overall. I would even take it over the this other version of the HS-129, but it's only in C, so whatever. And then these Stukas, I don't like any of these Stukas because they're only coming in B. And Stukas kind of struggle as the game goes on because anti-air becomes prevalent. So I don't have a lot of faith in using these. And then don't take this heavy fighter. It sucks. Can't turn. Dies to in any dogfight. I guess if you can head on with it, it's okay, but it's not really worth it. So we're just going to rely on Nimrods in order to have it. But otherwise, that is my version of First Pancelos. You can find a deck code in the description. Also, while you're down there, make sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on other content for Steel Division and other World War II games. Leave a comment down below. Have you played First Pancelos? Or in Men of Steel, what's your favorite division? Otherwise, that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day.